The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as my phone buzzed against the workbench. 10:30 on a Tuesday night, and I was still under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda trying to coax life back into her carburetor. The garage smelled of motor oil and determination, two things that had built my small auto repair business from nothing over the past 15 years. Shopping with Ashley. We'll be home late. Don't wait up. Melanie. I stared at the message, wiping my hands on an old rag. Ashley Morrison, whose husband Pete was probably drowning his sorrows at Murphy's bar right about now, complaining about his wife's spending habits to anyone who'd listen. Funny how Ashley could be in two places at once. My fingers moved across the screen before my brain caught up. Tell Ashley's husband I said hi. The reply came back faster than a ricocheting bullet. What do you mean? I could practically see Melanie's face through the phone, that deer-in-headlights expression she got when caught in one of her elaborate stories. 22 years of marriage teaches you to read between the lines, even when those lines are transmitted through cellular towers. Pete's been at Murphy's since 8. Saw his truck in the parking lot when I drove past. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 4 times before she responded. Maybe he left. Maybe Ashley picked him up. Maybe pigs learned to fly while I wasn't looking. This time, no response came. I set the phone down and returned to the Honda, but my concentration had evaporated like spilled gasoline on hot asphalt. The carburetor could wait until morning. Mrs. Patterson had been driving that rust bucket for 30 years. One more night wouldn't matter. I locked up the shop and drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, our little slice of suburban purgatory nestled between the interstate and Lake Morrison. Population 12,000 on a good day, where everyone knew everyone else's business better than their own. The kind of place where secrets had a half-life of about 15 minutes, unless you were really good at keeping them. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest 2-story colonial that Melanie had been trying to upgrade for the past 5 years. New shutters, fresh paint, landscaping that cost more than my first car, all part of her campaign to fit in with the real estate crowd she'd started running with after getting her license. The driveway was empty. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I parked my pickup and sat in the cab for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the kitchen window, I could see the coffee maker's red light glowing like a tiny beacon. Melanie always set it up before leaving, a habit from our early days when I worked double shifts to keep us afloat. Back when we were a team, instead of 2 people sharing the same address. Inside, the house felt hollow. Our daughter Ava was away at college, her first semester at State University, studying communications and spending my money with the enthusiasm of a lottery winner. The silence pressed against my eardrums as I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. That's when I saw it. Melanie's purse sat on the dresser, partially open. She never left her purse behind, not even for a quick trip to the grocery store. It was practically welded to her shoulder, containing what she called her life support system. Makeup, breath mints, credit cards, and her phone. Her main phone. I stood in the doorway, wrestling with myself. 22 years of marriage should come with some level of trust, shouldn't it? But 22 years also comes with instincts, and mine were screaming louder than a fire alarm. The purse contained the usual suspects. Wallet, keys, lipstick in 3 different shades, and a small zippered compartment I'd never paid attention to before. My fingers found something hard and rectangular inside. A second phone. Cheap, basic, the kind you buy at gas stations with prepaid minutes. The screen lit up at my touch, revealing a string of text messages that made my stomach clench like a fist. The contact was listed as D, but the content left no doubt about the sender's identity. Can't wait to see you tonight. Room 237 at the Riverside Motel. Wear the red dress. You know how crazy it drives me. Tell your husband you're shopping. He's too stupid to figure it out anyway. The timestamps showed the conversation had been going on for weeks. Dozens of messages, each one a small betrayal, each one a nail in the coffin of our marriage. Photos, too. Nothing explicit, but intimate enough to make my hands shake. I scrolled through the messages, my anger building like pressure in a boiler. Darren McKenzie. I knew the name, knew the face. He ran McKenzie Motors, a used car lot on the south side of town. Slick hair, expensive suits, and a reputation for selling lemons to single mothers. The kind of guy who probably practiced his smile in the mirror every morning. My wife was having an affair with a used car salesman. The cliché was almost insulting. The front door slammed downstairs, followed by the rapid click of heels on hardwood. I slipped the phone back into the purse and positioned myself at the bedroom window, pretending to look out at the street. Jake? Melanie's voice carried up the stairs, breathless and panicked. "Jake, are you home?" "Up here," I called back, keeping my voice neutral. She appeared in the doorway moments later, shopping bags conspicuously absent, her red dress wrinkled and her lipstick smeared. The same red dress mentioned in the text messages. "How was your shopping trip?" I asked, turning from the window. "Oh, you know Ashley. She dragged me all over the mall." The lie rolled off her tongue like she'd been practicing. "We lost track of time. Find anything good?" "Nothing worth buying." She moved to the dresser, her hand hovering near her purse. "I'm exhausted. Going to take a shower." I watched her gather her things, noting how she clutched the purse against her chest like a shield. "Melanie?" She paused in the bathroom doorway. "Yeah?" "Next time you go shopping with Ashley, maybe invite Pete along. I'm sure he'd love to see what his wife's been up to." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just a thought." She disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the shower start. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed where we'd planned our future, where we'd comforted each other through tough times, where we'd made love and made promises we apparently hadn't meant. The water ran for 20 minutes. When she finally emerged, wrapped in her terry cloth robe, I was still sitting in the same spot. "You okay?" she asked, avoiding my eyes. "Just thinking." "About what?" I looked at her, really looked at her. 43 years old, still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. But something had changed in her expression over the past few months. A distance, a restlessness I'd attributed to midlife growing pains. "About how much things can change without you noticing," I said. She climbed into bed beside me, maintaining careful distance. "Change isn't always bad, Jake." "No," I agreed. "Sometimes it's necessary." We lay in the darkness, both pretending to sleep, both knowing the other was awake. The house settled around us with small creaks and sighs, as if it too was adjusting to this new reality. I waited until her breathing became deep and regular before slipping out of bed. In my home office downstairs, I opened my laptop and began to research. Darren Mackenzie had quite the digital footprint. Business website, social media profiles, even a few newspaper articles about his community involvement. The Riverside Motel sat on the outskirts of town, a relic from the 1960s that somehow managed to stay in business despite its reputation as a place where people went to do things they couldn't do at home. Room 237 was on the second floor overlooking the parking lot. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair. 22 years of marriage, and it had come to this. My wife was texting another man from a burner phone, meeting him in cheap motels, and lying to my face with practiced ease. The old Jake, the trusting husband, the faithful provider, the man who believed in working hard and playing fair, would have confronted her, would have demanded explanations, begged for counseling, tried to save what could be saved. But that Jake was gone, dissolved in the acid of betrayal and humiliation. The new Jake had different ideas about how to handle this situation. I pulled out my own phone and composed a text message to Melanie's main number. "Hope you and Ashley found some good deals tonight. Sleep tight." Her phone buzzed on the nightstand upstairs. A few minutes later, my phone chimed with her reply. "Thanks, honey. Love you too," I typed back. The lies came so easily now for both of us. But I was just getting started. The next morning arrived with the kind of artificial cheerfulness that makes you want to crawl back under the covers. Melanie bustled around the kitchen, making coffee and toast, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She'd always been a morning person, but this performance felt forced, like she was auditioning for the role of devoted wife. "I've got 3 showings today," she announced, buttering her toast with unnecessary precision. "The Henderson place, that new construction on Oak Street, and the Morrison property by the lake." I nodded, spooning cereal into my mouth. "Busy day. Real estate waits for no one." She checked her reflection in the toaster's chrome surface, adjusting her hair. "Might be late again tonight. You know how clients can be." "Sure do." She kissed my forehead before leaving, a gesture that felt like a performance for an audience of one. I watched through the kitchen window as she backed out of the driveway in her white sedan, talking animatedly on her phone before she'd even reached the street. I finished my breakfast and drove to the shop, but my mind wasn't on carburetors and oil changes. It was on strategy. See, most people think revenge is about anger, about lashing out in the heat of the moment. But that's amateur hour. Real revenge requires patience, planning, and a deep understanding of your target's weaknesses. Melanie's weakness was her image. She'd spent the last 5 years carefully crafting her persona as a successful businesswoman, a pillar of the community, a woman who had it all together. That image was everything to her, more important than our marriage, apparently. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," Jared Walsh said, poking his head into the garage bay where I was pretending to work on Mrs. Patterson's Honda. Jared ran the boxing gym above Murphy's bar, a cramped space that smelled like sweat and determination. We'd been friends since high school, back when we thought we knew everything about everything. He was one of the few people in town who still treated me like a person instead of an extension of my wife's real estate empire. "Just thinking," I said. "Dangerous habit?" He leaned against my workbench, arms crossed. "Want to talk about it?" I considered telling him everything, the phone, the messages, the lies. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the growing realization that this was a fight I needed to handle alone. "Melanie's been working late a lot," I said instead. Jared's expression shifted slightly. "Real estate's a tough business." "So I hear." I set down my wrench and looked at him. "You hear things at the gym. People talk." "People always talk, Jake. Doesn't mean it's worth listening to." "But sometimes it is." He was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know if my wife is making me look like a fool." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Jared ran a hand through his graying hair and sighed. "There's been talk," he admitted. "Nothing concrete, just talk." "About Darren Mackenzie?" His silence was answer enough. "How long?" I asked. "Jake, how long have people been talking?" "A few weeks, maybe a month." He looked uncomfortable, like he was betraying a confidence. "Look, it might be nothing. You know how this town is? Someone sees two people having coffee and suddenly they're planning to run away together." But I knew it wasn't coffee. I'd seen the messages, the photos, the careful choreography of deception. The whole town probably knew before I did, whispering behind my back, pitying the poor mechanic whose wife was slumming it with a car salesman. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to think about it some more." Jared left, and I spent the rest of the day thinking. By closing time, I had the beginnings of a plan. The Riverside Motel sat on a stretch of highway that had seen better days. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting pink and blue shadows across the cracked parking lot. I parked my truck behind a dumpster and waited. At 7:30, Melanie's white sedan pulled into the lot. She parked near the stairs leading to the second floor, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror before getting out. She wore the red dress again, the one Darren apparently liked so much. 10 minutes later, a black BMW pulled up beside her car. Darren Mackenzie emerged, looking around nervously before heading up the stairs. Even from a distance, I could see the cocky swagger that probably impressed women half his age. I waited another 10 minutes before making my move. Mackenzie's BMW was a beautiful machine, sleek, expensive, and completely inappropriate for a small-town car dealer who claimed to be struggling with overhead costs. I walked around it slowly, admiring the paint job, the chrome details, the custom wheels that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. It would be a shame if something happened to it. I pulled out my pocket knife and considered my options. Slashing the tires would be satisfying but temporary. Keying the paint would be visible but repairable. I needed something more creative, something that would send a message without crossing any legal lines. The valve stems on his tires were easily accessible. I pressed the tip of my knife against each one, releasing just enough air to make the tires noticeably low, but not completely flat. He'd be able to drive, but he'd know something was wrong. Next, I opened my truck's glove compartment and retrieved a small bottle of honey I'd brought for this exact purpose. I squeezed it liberally under his door handles, on his windshield wipers, and across his side mirrors. Let him try to explain that sticky situation to his detail guy. For the finishing touch, I pulled out a piece of paper and wrote a simple message. "Try driving her home next time, Darren." I tucked it under his windshield wiper, where he couldn't miss it. As I walked back to my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. Not the deep, lasting kind that comes from honest work well done, but the sharp, immediate pleasure of a perfectly executed prank. My phone buzzed as I drove home. A text from Mrs. Dunleavy, our neighbor. "Saw your truck near the Riverside Motel. Everything okay?" I smiled. Mrs. Dunleavy was the town's unofficial information network, a 70-year-old woman with the curiosity of a private investigator and the discretion of a town crier. If she'd seen me, half the neighborhood would know by morning. "Just checking on a friend?" I replied. "That's nice, dear. Tell Melanie I said hello." The irony was perfect. Mrs. Dunleavy thought she was being helpful, but she'd just handed me a gift. By tomorrow, rumors would be swirling about why Jake Morrison was lurking around a motel known for extramarital activities. I got home before Melanie, giving me time to shower and settle into my recliner with a beer and the evening news. When she finally walked through the door at 10:15, I was the picture of domestic contentment. "How were the showings?" I asked without looking away from the television. "Good. Really good." She dropped her purse by the door and kicked off her heels. "The Henderson place has 3 interested parties. Might have a bidding war on our hands." "That's great, honey." She disappeared upstairs, and I heard the shower running again. When she came back down in her robe, she seemed agitated. "Jake, did you go out tonight?" "Just to Murphy's for a beer with Jared. Why?" "Mrs. Dunleavy texted me. Said she saw your truck near the Riverside Motel." I muted the television and turned to look at her. "Yeah, I stopped by there on my way to Murphy's. Thought I saw smoke coming from their dumpster. Turned out to be nothing." "Oh." Relief washed over her face. "That was nice of you to check." "Just being a good citizen?" I unmuted the TV. "How's Ashley doing, by the way? You two have been spending a lot of time together lately." "Oh, she's fine. Going through a rough patch with Pete." "Sorry to hear that. Marriage is tough." "Yeah," she said quietly. "It really is." Later that night, as Melanie slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. I'd announced my presence without revealing my hand, planted seeds of doubt without making accusations. But this was just the beginning. Darren and Melanie thought they were playing a game where only they knew the rules. They were about to discover that I'd been studying the rule book too, and I was a much better player than they'd given me credit for. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. The next morning brought the kind of small-town drama that spreads faster than gossip at a church social. Darren Mackenzie's BMW sat in his dealership's service bay, covered in what looked like crystallized tree sap but smelled suspiciously like honey. Word was he'd spent an hour trying to clean his door handles before giving up and calling a detailing service. I heard about it from Tommy Rodriguez at the parts store, who'd heard it from his cousin Maria, who'd gotten it straight from the detail shop owner. By lunchtime, half the town was speculating about who might have vandalized the car of Millbrook's most notorious bachelor. "Probably some woman he promised to marry," suggested Betty at the diner, refilling my coffee cup with the enthusiasm of someone sharing state secrets. "Or maybe a husband who found out about his wandering ways," added Frank, the retired postmaster who knew everyone's business from 20 years of reading return addresses. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was grinning like a kid who'd gotten away with putting gum in the teacher's hair. The beauty of small-town justice was that everyone wanted to believe the worst about people they already disliked, and Darren Mackenzie had been making enemies since he'd arrived 5 years ago with his flashy car and flashier promises. My phone buzzed during lunch. Melanie, texting from her office. "Heard about Darren's car? Some people have no respect for other people's property." "Karma's a funny thing," I replied. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just that sometimes people get what's coming to them." I could almost see her frowning at her phone, trying to decode my message. Good. Let her wonder. The afternoon brought Mrs. Patterson back to collect her Honda, now running like a machine half its age. She counted out cash from a worn envelope, adding a $10 tip that I tried to refuse. "Nonsense," she said, pressing the bill into my palm. "Good work deserves good pay, not like some people in this town who think they can get something for nothing." "Anyone in particular?" I asked. "That Mackenzie fellow, for one. Sold my nephew a truck that died 2 weeks later. Wouldn't take it back, wouldn't fix it, just kept making excuses." She shook her head. "Mark my words, Jake. Men like that always get their comeuppance." "I hope you're right, Mrs. Patterson." Oh, I am. The Lord has a way of settling accounts." After she left, I spent some time thinking about divine justice versus the do-it-yourself variety. Mrs. Patterson was a good woman who believed in playing by the rules and trusting the universe to balance the scales. 6 months ago, I might have agreed with her, but 6 months ago, I hadn't discovered my wife's secret phone. At 5 o'clock, I closed the shop and drove to Jared's gym. The place was busy with the after-work crowd, office workers trying to punch away their frustrations, college kids home for the summer, and a few serious fighters preparing for upcoming matches. Jared was working the heavy bag when I arrived, his movements still crisp despite being north of 50. He'd been a decent amateur boxer in his youth, good enough to dream about turning professional before reality, and a broken hand convinced him to find a more reliable way to make a living. "Heard about Mackenzie's car," he said without stopping his rhythm. "Honey, from what I hear?" "That's weird." "Yeah, weird." He threw a particularly hard combination that made the bag jump. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "Why would I know anything about Darren Mackenzie's car?" "Just asking." He stepped back and pulled off his gloves. "Want to work the pads?" We spent the next hour going through combinations, Jared calling out punches while I tried to remember the footwork he'd taught me years ago. Boxing had never been my sport, but there was something therapeutic about hitting things in a controlled environment. "Your form's getting better," he said as we finished. "More focused." "I've been practicing." "On what?" "Heavy bag in my garage. Set it up last month." That was a lie. I'd never owned a heavy bag, but Jared didn't need to know that my newfound focus came from having a target for my anger. "Good for you. Physical fitness is important at our age." He tossed me a towel. "How are things at home?" "Same as always." "That good or bad?" I considered the question while wiping sweat from my face. "Depends on your perspective, I guess." We were interrupted by the arrival of Tracy Morrison. No relation, despite the shared last name. She was Melanie's best friend and business partner, a perfectly coiffed woman in her early 40s who ran a successful mommy blog and considered herself an influencer. Her Instagram account had over 10,000 followers, mostly other suburban mothers who envied her seemingly perfect life. "Jake," she called out with a kind of enthusiasm that made me immediately suspicious. "I didn't know you worked out here." "Just started coming," I said, noting how she'd positioned herself between me and the exit. "That's wonderful. Melanie mentioned you were trying to get in shape." She smiled with too many teeth. "She's been so worried about your health lately." "Has she?" "Oh, yes. She says you've been under a lot of stress with the business and everything." Tracy's voice carried the practiced concern of someone who made a living out of other people's problems. "I told her she should encourage you to find a hobby, something to take your mind off work." "Like boxing?" "Well, maybe something a little less aggressive. Have you considered yoga or meditation?" I almost laughed. Tracy Morrison suggesting meditation was like a shark recommending vegetarianism. This woman had built her brand on manufactured drama and carefully curated conflict. "I'll think about it," I said. "You should also think about couples counseling," she continued, apparently mistaking my politeness for an invitation to provide marriage advice. "Melanie and I were just talking about how important communication is in a relationship." "Were you now?" "Oh, yes. She feels like you two have been growing apart lately, not talking as much as you used to." This was interesting. Melanie had been discussing our marriage with Tracy, probably looking for validation for whatever she was planning to do next. In my experience, women like Tracy didn't offer unsolicited advice unless they had an agenda. "What else did she say?" I asked. "Just that she's been feeling a little unappreciated, like you take her for granted." Tracy's expression was all practiced sympathy. "I'm sure it's nothing that can't be fixed with a little effort on both sides." "I appreciate the advice, Tracy." "Of course. That's what friends are for." She checked her phone with the urgency of someone expecting important news. "I should run. Tell Melanie I'll call her later about the Morrison listing." After she left, Jared shook his head. "That woman could start a fight in an empty room. She's Melanie's friend. She's nobody's friend. She's a user." He started wrapping up the equipment. "You want some real advice? Stay away from Tracy Morrison. Whatever's going on with you and Melanie, she'll just make it worse." "Why do you say that?" "Because that's what she does. Creates drama, then positions herself as the solution. Half the divorces in this town can be traced back to her helpful suggestions." I filed that information away for future reference. If Tracy was involved in my wife's decision-making process, I needed to understand her motivations and methods. Driving home, I thought about the conversation. Melanie felt unappreciated. After 22 years of working 60-hour weeks to build a business that supported her real estate dreams, after paying for Ava's college tuition and Tracy's expensive lifestyle advice. The house was dark when I arrived, but Melanie's car was in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone with an expression I couldn't quite read. "How was your day?" I asked. "Fine." She didn't look up from the screen. "Busy." "Tracy stopped by the gym. Said you two have been talking about us." That got her attention. "What did she tell you?" "That you feel unappreciated." Melanie set down her phone and looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. "Do you think I'm wrong to feel that way?" "I think 22 years of marriage should count for something." "It does count, but it's not enough anymore, Jake." The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. For a moment, she wasn't the lying, cheating woman I'd discovered through text messages. She was just my wife, tired and sad, and looking for something I apparently couldn't give her. "What would be enough?" I asked. "I don't know. Something different. Something more." "More than what we have? More than what we've become?" We stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the accumulated artifacts of our shared life, wedding photos, Ava's school pictures, vacation souvenirs, and mortgage payments, and I realized we were having the conversation I'd been dreading and anticipating for months. "Are you having an affair, Melanie?" The question hung between us like a live wire. She could have denied it, could have acted shocked or hurt or angry. Instead, she just looked tired. Why would you ask me that? Because I need to know where we stand. Where do you think we stand? I think we're in trouble. Yeah, she said quietly. We really are. She went upstairs without saying goodnight, leaving me alone with the dishes and the growing certainty that my marriage was ending whether I wanted it to or not. But ending it on her terms, with me as the clueless husband who never saw it coming, that wasn't going to happen. I pulled out my phone and started making notes. If Melanie wanted something different, something more, I was happy to oblige. Just not in the way she expected. Friday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that matched my mood perfectly. Melanie left early for a client breakfast that probably involved room service and Darren Mackenzie's wandering hands. She didn't bother with the usual performance of wifely concern, just grabbed her purse and walked out without a word. Progress, of sorts. I spent the morning catching up on paperwork and returning phone calls, but my mind kept drifting to the conversation we'd had the night before. Melanie's admission that our marriage was in trouble hadn't surprised me, but her willingness to say it out loud had. It suggested she was preparing for the next phase of whatever plan she and Tracy had cooked up. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ava's number, which was unusual for a Friday morning when she should have been in class. Hey, sweetheart, I answered. Shouldn't you be learning something important right now? Dad, we need to talk. Her voice had that serious tone she'd inherited from her mother, the one that meant I was about to hear something I didn't want to hear. What's on your mind? Mom called me last night. She's really upset. I set down my pen and gave the conversation my full attention. Upset about what? About you, about your marriage. She says you've been acting strange lately, asking weird questions, following her around. Following her around? That's what she said. Something about you showing up at places where you don't belong, making accusations. Ava's voice carried the kind of righteousness that only 19-year-olds could muster. Dad, what's going on? I considered my options. I could tell Ava the truth about her mother's affair, show her the text messages, explain why I'd been acting strange. But that would make her choose sides in a war she didn't start, and I wasn't ready to weaponize my daughter against her mother. Not yet, anyway. Your mom and I are going through a rough patch, I said instead. Sometimes that makes people see things that aren't there. Are you getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. Hearing it from Ava made it real in a way that Melanie's evasions and my own suspicions hadn't. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope not. Then why don't you try harder? Why don't you do something romantic, like take her on a vacation or buy her flowers or something? If only it were that simple. If only 22 years of marriage could be saved with roses and a weekend getaway. But Ava was 19 and still believed in fairy tale endings, where love conquered all and everyone lived happily ever after. It's complicated, Ava. It doesn't have to be. Just tell her you love her and you want to work things out. What if she doesn't want to work things out? Then you fight for her. You don't just give up. After we hung up, I sat in my office staring at the phone. Ava's advice was well-meaning but naive. She didn't understand that some fights were over before they began, that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven with grand gestures and heartfelt apologies. But she'd given me an idea. If Melanie wanted to paint me as the neglectful husband who drove her into another man's arms, I could play that role, but I could also play the devoted husband trying to save his marriage. Let the town see both versions and decide which one they believed. I drove to Fletcher's Flowers, the little shop downtown that had been supplying the town's romantic gestures for 30 years. Mrs. Fletcher, the owner, greeted me with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely saw men in her establishment outside of Valentine's Day and anniversaries. Jake Morrison, what brings you in today? I need flowers for Melanie. Something special. How special are we talking? Special enough to get people's attention. Mrs. Fletcher's eyes lit up. She was as much a part of the town's gossip network as Mrs. Dunleavy, but she specialized in the romantic subplot of everyone's drama. I have just the thing, she said, leading me to a display of elaborate arrangements. 24 red roses with baby's breath and greenery. Very classic, very romantic. Perfect. Can you deliver them to her office? Of course. Should I include a card? I thought for a moment. The message needed to be public enough to generate talk, but private enough to seem genuine. Just sign it. All my love, Jake. Let's start over. Mrs. Fletcher practically glowed with vicarious romance. Oh, that's beautiful. She's going to be so surprised. I hope so. The flowers would arrive at Melanie's real estate office around noon, when the maximum number of people would be there to witness the gesture. By evening, half the town would know that Jake Morrison was trying to win back his wife's affections. Next stop was Murphy's Bar, where the lunch crowd was already settling in for their daily dose of beer and gossip. I ordered a burger and made sure to sit at the bar where everyone could see me. "Heard you sent flowers to Melanie today," said Pete Morrison, Ashley's husband and no relation to me or Tracy despite our shared surname. "That's real romantic. Word traveled fast in a town this size. Just trying to keep the spark alive, you know?" "Good for you, man. Too many guys take their wives for granted." Pete took a long pull from his beer. "My Ashley's always complaining that I don't do romantic stuff anymore." "Maybe you should surprise her sometime?" "Yeah, maybe." He signaled for another beer. "Course, she's been pretty busy lately. Always out with her girlfriends, shopping and stuff." I almost felt sorry for Pete. He was living the same lie I'd been living, trusting his wife's stories about girls' nights and shopping trips. The difference was that Pete still believed in his marriage, while I was busy planning its destruction. "Women need their friends," I said. Sure. I just wish she'd spend a little more time at home, you know?" My phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. "Thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful." I showed the message to Pete and a few other guys at the bar. "See, romance isn't gone. It's just sleeping." They all laughed and agreed, buying into the narrative I was creating. Jake Morrison, the devoted husband trying to save his marriage. It was a good story, and people wanted to believe it. But stories have a way of taking on lives of their own. At 3 o'clock, I got a call from Tracy Morrison. Her voice was sickeningly sweet, like artificial honey poured over broken glass. "Jake, I heard about the flowers. That was so thoughtful of you." "Just trying to show Melanie how much she means to me." "That's wonderful. She called me crying happy tears. She's been hoping you'd make a gesture like that." "Has she?" "Oh, yes. She's been telling me for weeks that she wished you'd be more romantic, more attentive. This is exactly what she needed." I doubted that. More likely, Melanie was panicking because my public display of affection didn't fit with whatever narrative she and Darren had been constructing about our failing marriage. "I'm glad she's happy," I said. "You should take her out to dinner tonight. Somewhere nice, somewhere people will see you together. Show the whole town what a devoted couple you are." There it was, Tracy's real agenda. She wanted us to perform our marriage for public consumption, to create the illusion of reconciliation. But why? What did she gain from keeping Melanie and me together? Unless she didn't want us together. Unless she wanted us to fail publicly, dramatically, with maximum entertainment value for her blog and social media accounts. "That's a great idea, Tracy. I'll make reservations at Romano's." "Perfect. I'll make sure to spread the word. Everyone will be so happy to see you two working things out." Romano's was the nicest restaurant in town, the kind of place where proposals happened and anniversaries were celebrated. It was also the kind of place where everyone would notice if Jake and Melanie Morrison were having dinner together after weeks of rumors about marital problems. I called and made reservations for 7 o'clock, then texted Melanie. "Dinner tonight at Romano's. 7 o'clock. Wear something nice." Her response came back quickly. "Okay. Looking forward to it." But I knew she wasn't looking forward to it. She was dreading it, wondering what game I was playing, trying to figure out how to navigate an evening of public reconciliation when she'd rather be texting her boyfriend about their next motel rendezvous. The beauty of it was that she had no choice. If she refused to come to dinner, she'd look like the unreasonable wife rejecting her husband's romantic gesture. If she came but acted cold or distant, people would notice and judge her accordingly. Either way, I won. At 6:30, I went home to shower and change clothes. Melanie was already getting ready, wearing a black dress that I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She looked beautiful, and for a moment I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "You look stunning," I said. "Thank you." She was applying lipstick in the bathroom mirror, her movements careful and precise. "Jake, what are we doing?" "Having dinner." "You know what I mean." I stepped behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "I'm fighting for my marriage, Melanie. Isn't that what you wanted? Is it real, or is it just for show? Does it matter?" She turned to face me, and for a moment we were just two people who'd loved each other once upon a time, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. "It matters to me," she said quietly. "Then let's find out together." Romano's was crowded for a Friday night, filled with couples celebrating date nights and families marking special occasions. The hostess seated us at a table near the window, where anyone walking by could see us sharing wine and holding hands across the white tablecloth. We talked about safe topics, Ava's classes, my business, her latest real estate deals. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple reconnecting after a rough patch. Melanie even laughed at a few of my jokes, though I could see the effort it took. "People are watching us," she said during the main course. "Let them watch." "This feels weird, Jake, like we're performing." "Aren't we always performing? Isn't that what marriage is after a certain point?" She considered this while cutting her salmon into precise pieces. "Is that what you think we've become? A performance? I think we've become strangers who share a mortgage." "That's harsh, but accurate." She set down her fork and looked at me directly. "What do you want from me, Jake?" It was a loaded question with no simple answer. What I wanted was to go back in time and prevent her from downloading that dating app or meeting Darren McKenzie or deciding that our marriage wasn't worth saving. What I wanted was for her to choose me over him, to fight for us the way I was pretending to fight for us. But what I really wanted, if I was being honest, was to watch her world crumble the same way mine had crumbled when I found that phone. "I want us to be honest with each other," I said. "Okay. You want honesty?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I'm not happy, Jake. I haven't been happy for a long time, and I don't think you have been either." "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know, but sending flowers and taking me to dinner isn't going to fix what's broken between us." "What would fix it?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the people walking by on the sidewalk. "Maybe nothing. Maybe we're just too different now." "Different how?" "You want everything to stay the same. I want things to change." "What kind of changes?" "I want to feel alive again, Jake. I want to feel like I matter, like I'm more than just someone's wife or someone's mother. I want to feel like I'm living my own life instead of just supporting everyone else's." It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in months, and it cut deeper than any accusation or insult could have. Because I understood what she meant, even if I didn't agree with her methods. "And you can't feel that way with me?" "I don't know. Can I?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I could have risen to meet it, could have promised to change, to be more supportive of her dreams and ambitions. I could have suggested counseling or a trial separation or any number of reasonable solutions to our marital problems. Instead, I smiled and raised my wine glass. "Here's to finding out," I said. We finished dinner in relative peace, playing our roles as the reconciling couple for the benefit of our audience. When the check came, I made a show of leaving a generous tip, knowing that our server would remember the romantic dinner where Jake Morrison tried to win back his wife. Walking to our cars, Melanie seemed lighter somehow, as if our conversation had lifted some invisible weight from her shoulders. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "It was nice." "We should do it more often." "Maybe we should." She kissed me goodnight in the parking lot, a real kiss that lasted long enough for anyone watching to believe it meant something. Then she got in her car and drove home, probably to text Darren about the weird evening she'd just endured. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the other diners leave the restaurant. Some of them looked happy, holding hands and laughing. Others looked tired, going through the motions of romance without feeling it. All of them looked more authentic than Melanie and me. My phone buzzed with a text from Tracy. "Heard dinner went well. So happy you two are working things out." The speed of small-town gossip never ceased to amaze me. We'd barely left the restaurant, and already the news was spreading through Tracy's network of busybodies and drama seekers. "Thanks for the suggestion," I replied. "You were right about the public gesture. I'm always right about these things. It's my gift." Her gift was manipulation, but I wasn't going to argue the point. Let Tracy think she was pulling the strings. Let Melanie think the flowers and dinner meant I was ready to play the fool again. Let them all think whatever they wanted to think, because while they were focused on the performance, I was planning the finale. Saturday morning brought unseasonably warm weather and the kind of restless energy that makes people do things they'll later regret. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on the back porch watching the sun rise over our carefully manicured lawn. Melanie was still sleeping, probably exhausted from the mental gymnastics required to navigate our dinner at Romano's while maintaining her double life. I'd heard her phone buzzing late into the night, no doubt fielding messages from both Darren and Tracy about the evening's performance. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed and ready to implement the final phase of my plan. Everything up to this point had been preparation, setting the stage for what was about to happen. The flowers, the dinner, the public reconciliation, all of it designed to make what came next even more devastating. I drove to the storage unit I'd rented the week before, using cash and a fake name. Inside was everything I'd need for the day ahead. A high-quality camera with a telephoto lens, a digital recorder, and printouts of every text message from Melanie's secret phone. The first stop was Mackenzie Motors, where Darren's freshly detailed BMW sat in its usual spot near the showroom entrance. The honey incident had apparently taught him nothing about discretion. If anything, he seemed more arrogant than before, probably thinking he'd gotten away with something. I parked across the street and waited. Small-town car lots didn't do much business on Saturday mornings, which meant Darren would likely be alone in the office, catching up on paperwork or planning his next conquest. At 9:15, Melanie's white sedan pulled into the lot. She parked behind the building, out of sight from the main road, and hurried inside through the back entrance. Even from a distance, I could see she was nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. I gave them 10 minutes to get comfortable, then made my move. The back door was unlocked, probably left that way to facilitate Melanie's discreet entrance. I slipped inside and made my way toward the voices coming from Darren's office. "Told you this was getting too risky," Melanie was saying. "The flowers, the dinner, all these public gestures. Jake's not stupid, Darren. He knows something's up." "Relax, baby. Your husband's just trying to save face. Probably heard the rumors and figured he better start paying attention to his wife. You don't know him like I do. When Jake gets quiet like this, when he starts being overly nice, it means he's planning something." "Like what?" "The guy fixes cars for a living. What's he going to do? Change my oil wrong?" They both laughed, and the sound made my jaw clench. 22 years of marriage, and my wife was letting her boyfriend mock me like I was some kind of joke. I positioned myself outside the office door and started recording. "I'm serious, Darren. Maybe we should cool things off for a while, at least until the divorce is final." "Divorce? I thought you were going to try counseling first, string him along for a few more months." That was before he started acting like the perfect husband again. Tracy thinks I should play along, make him think there's hope. Tracy's got her own agenda. She wants you to drag this out for her stupid blog. More drama means more followers. She's been a good friend to me. She's been using you, Mel, just like she uses everyone else in this pathetic town. I heard movement inside the office, probably them getting more comfortable on the couch I'd seen through the window. The next few minutes of recording would be too explicit to play in public, but the conversation I'd already captured was damning enough. I slipped back outside and returned to my truck, where I spent the next hour transferring the audio file to my laptop and preparing copies of the text messages. By the time Melanie left the car lot, I had everything I needed for the grand finale. The Millbrook Community Center was hosting its annual Fall Festival that afternoon, one of those small-town events where everyone showed up to eat funnel cake and pretend they enjoyed each other's company. It was perfect for what I had in mind. I arrived early and set up a small table near the main entrance, displaying a sign that read, "Morrison Auto Repair, 25 years of honest service." Most people would assume I was there to drum up business, which was exactly what I wanted them to think. The festival crowd started arriving around noon. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers looking for something to do, all the usual suspects from our little corner of suburban purgatory. I smiled and waved, handed out business cards, played the role of the friendly local businessman. At 2 o'clock, I spotted Melanie and Tracy making their entrance together, both dressed in their festival best and carrying themselves like queens surveying their domain. They made the rounds, stopping to chat with various groups, spreading whatever version of recent events best served their purposes. Darren arrived separately, wearing jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. He kept his distance from Melanie, but I could see them exchanging glances across the crowd. At 3 o'clock, I made my announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying across the festival grounds, "could I have your attention for just a moment?" The crowd gradually quieted, turning toward my table with the mild curiosity that small-town events generated. I saw Melanie freeze in place near the funnel cake stand, her face going pale. "Most of you know me as Jake Morrison from Morrison Auto Repair. I've been part of this community for over 20 years, and I've always believed in treating people with honesty and respect." A few people nodded approvingly. Mrs. Patterson gave me an encouraging smile. "Unfortunately, I've recently discovered that not everyone shares those values. Some people think they can lie and cheat and betray the trust of others without consequences." Now I had everyone's attention. Melanie started moving toward me, but Tracy grabbed her arm, probably calculating whether intervention would make things better or worse. "I'm not here to air my personal laundry in public," I continued, "but I think this community deserves to know the truth about certain individuals who have been deceiving their friends, their family, and their customers." I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the portable speaker I'd brought for this exact purpose. "This is a recording I made this morning at Mackenzie Motors. I think you'll find it very enlightening." Melanie's voice filled the air, crystal clear and unmistakably hers. "Jake's not stupid, Darren. He knows something's up." The crowd went silent, everyone straining to hear the conversation that followed. As the recording played, I watched faces change from confusion to understanding to shock. Mrs. Dunleavy covered her mouth with her hand. Pete Morrison looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. When it ended, I switched to the slideshow of text messages I'd prepared, projecting them onto a white banner I'd hung behind my table. "These are messages from my wife's secret phone," I announced. Messages between her and Darren McKenzie, planning their affair while I worked 60-hour weeks to support our family. The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Some people started taking pictures with their phones, already planning how they'd share this drama on social media. Others began moving away, uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. Melanie finally broke free from Tracy's grip and pushed through the crowd toward my table. "Jake, stop this," she pleaded. "Please don't do this here." "Where would you prefer I do it, Mel? At Romano's, where we had our fake reconciliation dinner, or maybe at the Riverside Motel where you've been meeting your boyfriend? You're embarrassing yourself." "No, I'm embarrassing you. There's a difference." Darren had disappeared, probably slinking away as soon as he realized what was happening. Smart move on his part, but it left Melanie to face the crowd alone. 22 years, I said, addressing the crowd more than her. 22 years of marriage, and this is what it comes to. A secret phone, a used car salesman, and a wife who thinks I'm too stupid to figure it out. Jake, please... Please what? Please pretend I don't know. Please keep playing the fool so you can have your cake and eat it too? Tracy finally made her move, stepping forward with her phone already recording. "This is harassment," she announced loudly. "Jake Morrison is having some kind of breakdown, and he's taking it out on his wife in public. Actually, Tracy, I've got something for you too." I switched to a new slide, showing screenshots of Tracy's direct messages with various married women in town, encouraging them to explore their options and not settle for boring husbands. Turns out our local marriage counselor has been sabotaging relationships for blog content. How's that for community service? Tracy's face went from righteous indignation to panic in about 2 seconds. She'd built her online brand on being the wise friend who helped women navigate relationship problems, but the messages showed her actively encouraging affairs and divorces. "That's taken out of context," she stammered. "Really? Because it looks pretty clear to me. Your husband sounds boring. You deserve excitement. Life's too short to settle." "That's your advice to married women?" The crowd was eating it up. Nothing entertained small-town people like watching their local celebrities get taken down a few pegs. Phones were recording from every angle, capturing the meltdown for posterity. "I'm leaving," Melanie announced, but I wasn't done yet. "One more thing," I called out. "I've filed for divorce, effective immediately. I've also closed our joint bank accounts and canceled the credit cards. Melanie, you'll be hearing from my lawyer on Monday." She stopped walking and turned back to face me. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. Adultery voids our prenuptial agreement, which means you get exactly what you brought to this marriage. Nothing." The crowd gasped. Even in small towns, financial warfare was considered the nuclear option. "And Darren," I called out, though he was long gone, "I've reported your business practices to the state attorney general. Turns out selling cars with rolled-back odometers is still illegal, even in Millbrook." That was a bluff, but it sounded good and added another layer to the public humiliation. Melanie walked away without another word, Tracy scurrying after her like a loyal dog. The crowd began to disperse, everyone eager to spread the news of what they'd witnessed. Mrs. Patterson approached my table, shaking her head sadly. "I'm sorry it came to this, Jake," she said. "But sometimes the truth needs to come out?" "Yes, ma'am, it does." "What will you do now?" I looked around at the festival, at the people who'd been my neighbors and customers for over 20 years. Some of them looked at me with sympathy, others with disapproval. A few seemed excited by the drama, already planning how they'd retell the story. "I'm going to start over," I said. "Somewhere else with people who understand the value of honesty." That's probably for the best. I packed up my equipment and drove home to an empty house. Melanie had apparently come and gone, taking some clothes and personal items. Her secret phone lay on the kitchen counter, smashed beyond repair. I sat in my recliner and opened a beer, feeling strangely empty. The revenge had been everything I'd planned. Public, humiliating, and complete. Melanie's reputation was destroyed, Tracy's influencer career was finished, and Darren would be lucky to sell another car in this town. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, like an actor who'd finally finished a long and exhausting performance. My phone rang. Ava's number. "Dad, what the heck happened? Mom called me crying, and there are videos all over social media of you at some festival. Your mother was having an affair, sweetheart. I found out and decided to stop pretending I didn't know." Silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, I know it's not what you wanted to hear. I know you hoped we could work things out, but some things can't be fixed with flowers and dinner dates. Did you have to do it so publicly? Yes, I did. Why? Because private confrontations allow people to spin the story however they want. Public ones create a permanent record. But now everyone's talking about our family like we're some kind of soap opera. Let them talk. In 6 months, they'll find someone else to gossip about. We talked for another 20 minutes, with me trying to explain decisions that probably seemed cruel and vindictive to a 19-year-old who still believed in happy endings. Eventually, she hung up, promising to call back when she'd processed everything. I finished my beer and started planning my exit from Millbrook. The business could be sold, the house put on the market, the whole life I'd built here dismantled and packed away. 22 years of marriage, reduced to a divorce filing and a public spectacle. But as I sat in the gathering darkness of my empty house, I realized I wasn't mourning the end of my marriage. I was mourning the end of my illusions about it. The marriage had been over long before I found that phone. I'd just been too stubborn or too scared to admit it. Now, finally, it was finished. And despite everything, I felt free. 6 months later, I was running Morrison Auto Repair out of a converted garage in Riverside, a town about 2 hours south of Millbrook, where nobody knew my story and nobody cared about my past. The work was the same, fixing engines, replacing brakes, keeping people's cars running. But the atmosphere was different, cleaner somehow. The divorce had been finalized in February, with Melanie getting exactly what I'd promised her at the festival. Nothing. She'd tried to contest the prenuptial agreement, but the evidence of her affair was too overwhelming. Her lawyer had advised her to take what she could get and move on. Last I heard, she was working at a real estate office in the state capital, starting over with a new name and a carefully edited version of her history. Darren had left town shortly after the festival, his car lot shuttered and his reputation in ruins. Tracy had tried to rebrand herself as a divorce recovery coach, but her follower count had plummeted after the screenshots of her messages went viral. Ava visited me once a month, still struggling to understand what had happened to her family, but gradually accepting that some stories don't have happy endings. She was majoring in psychology now, probably trying to figure out what had gone wrong with her parents' marriage. The house in Millbrook had sold quickly, to a young couple with 2 kids and dreams of suburban happiness. I hoped they'd have better luck than Melanie and I had. My new place was a small apartment above the garage, furnished with the basics and nothing more. No wedding photos, no family portraits, no artifacts from a life that had turned out to be mostly pretense, just tools, books, and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if there had been another way to handle the situation that wouldn't have required such public humiliation. But then I remembered the text messages, the lies, the months of being treated like a fool, and the regret faded. Melanie had made her choices. I'd simply made sure she lived with the consequences. The truth was, we'd both been living lies for years before the affair started. She'd been pretending to be happy in our marriage, and I'd been pretending not to notice her unhappiness. The affair was just the final act in a performance that had been going on for far too long. At least now it was over. I locked up the garage and climbed the stairs to my apartment, where a frozen dinner and a good book were waiting. Simple pleasures for a simpler life. Outside, the sun was setting over a town where nobody knew my name or my story, where I could be just Jake the mechanic, instead of Jake the guy whose wife cheated on him with a car salesman. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest. And after 22 years of lies, honesty felt like freedom.